let's talk about housing because I think it's an issue that has been lying under the radar for what I would argue is a rather long time. This has been an ongoing issue for many administrations prior to just this one. And, you know, this is something specifically that men and women in their late 20s, early 30s are starting to look at housing prices. They're starting to go, okay, we're going to plan for a home. People who are just getting married, we're going to plan to get a home. And this is something where they're looking at the housing market, they're looking at prices, they're going, this is something that is unattainable. The median house in Korea cost $700,000 to $1 million. That is with people's salaries. That is just unaffordable. That's absolutely unaffordable. So the E administration did something back in, I believe, in June, where they essentially said, and actually here we have an article from the Korean Times, and they break this down really nicely. So let's pull that up. They said, this is the Korean Times, in an effort to curb housing debt and housing prices, the government in late June imposed a $600 million, that's $428,000, or 600 million won, that's $428,000, cap on mortgage loans for property purchases in the capital region, that's just in Seoul, while suspending home-backed loans for multiple homeowners, I believe, over that amount. The volume of mortgage loans, which was originally projected to grow by 5% over the period, will instead expand at a slower pace by 1.2 to 1.6%. Now, what they're saying is, essentially, what the E administration did was say, okay, if you want more than a $600 million loan, you can't get one. We're gonna put a cap on that. And essentially, the goal was to cool down the market and stop the purchasing of homes. Now, this is only a temporary measure. This is not going to stop housing prices from continuing to go up. So, what has been their play? What has been their goal? What has been their solution to the problem of rising housing prices? This is from I always butcher this, Hank Yole. This is from them. They had an article. This is Lee Jae-myung saying, playing with fire, Korea could face a real estate bubble like Japan. The article reads, while discussing Korea's overheated real estate market on Tuesday, Korean President Lee Jae-myung said that Korea runs a high risk of ending up like Japan because of the extremely overvalued real estate market, and instructed related government ministries to take stern measures. Compared to other countries, Korean real estate prices relative to national income are likely to be higher than anywhere else. Since those prices are extremely overvalued, we're very likely to turn out like Japan at some point. Now, he's saying that these home prices are extremely overvalued, and I quibble with that a little bit. I quibble with that for a couple of reasons, but we'll get into that in just a second. Let's continue in the article. It's essential we block irregular pricing or market abuse driven by misinformation. If you keep playing with fire, someone's going to get burned. If you keep playing with fire, someone's going to get burned. So what he's articulating here is that the reason the housing prices are so high is because there's irregularities in the market. People are manipulating the system. People are striking up deals that are illegal. People are listing houses for 3 or 4 times their worth. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong. That is true that those things are happening. That happens in every market. But to say that that's why housing prices are high, I think is dishonest. I think is incredibly dishonest, because that is not the only thing that's happening, but that is the thing that's the easiest to tackle. Let's continue in the article, and I'll make my case to you. I'll make my case to you. It says here, he is concerned that Korea may repeat the mistake of Japan, where real estate prices skyrocketed during an economic boom in the 80s, only to crater when the bubble popped in the 90s. I'm going to quibble with that characterization just a little bit because the Japanese government saw that there was a bubble and they tried to deflate that bubble, but instead of deflating it, they popped it. I'm quibbling. That's neither here nor there. It continues. I'm told that AI technology is enabling the proliferation of misleading and exaggerated advertisements, I can't speak, on social media. There are also cases of suspected manipulation of real estate prices. Such behavior constitutes market abuse, which inflicts severe damage on the national economy. Stern measures must be taken. Now, the Democratic Party and the administration will soon announce raft policies aimed at stabilizing the real estate market. Measures to strictly, and this is, okay, let's pay attention to what he's highlighting here, right? Because I think it's incredibly important to understand his perspective of the market and his perspective of the solutions to what's going on. He says, measures to strictly punish market abuse through a complete review of suspicious transactions, even those paid in cash, and to set up a new supervisory board for real estate market will be announced this week. Okay. Those are good things. I'm not negating that those are good things. Those are great things. I think it's important that these things be tackled. However, there are millions of homes here in Seoul, and you're telling me that that's the reason why the housing market is driven up so high? It's, again, it is, I would say, this is something that centrists, both liberals, centrist conservatives, like to do. They like to, when they see a problem, they like to tackle the one portion of the problem that they know they can solve in the temporary without actually tackling the underlying issues of why this problem exists in the first place. And so I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Back in June, I don't know if this is actually still ongoing, and I don't have access to the article because it's paywalled and I'm not paying for that. But back in June, the administration said that they were going to ban foreigners from buying homes in Seoul. And this was to, again, cool down the market and stop, speculation in the housing market, right? So, cool, fine. But again, this does not get to the structural problem here that we have in Seoul. And the structural problem, I'm skipping around a little bit, the structural problem that we have here is this right here. Over half of the population resides in the Seoul metro area. More than half. This is an article from the Korean Herald. More than half of the population resides here in Seoul. The kind of pressures that puts on the economy, the kinds of pressures that puts on the decision making from just normal Koreans, imagine if you will, that New York City and everything that's involved with New York City, Wall Street, the TV industry, everything that's involved with New York City, LA, and Washington, D.C. were all swept up into one major megacity. That is Seoul. That is what Seoul is. Seoul is all of those things in one. It's the tech hub. It's the financial hub. It is the government hub of the country. And so what does that do for the smaller cities and towns? What does that do for Busan? What does that do for Daegu? Well, when young people go out and they want to look for a job, where do they go? Where the opportunities are, where the money is. That's Seoul. So the structural problems that we have here The structural problem here isn't that, well, yeah, there's some, people who are taking advantage of the system and people who are manipulating this. And, well, yes, those are valid issues that do need to be addressed. The broader problem that we have here is there are too many people in Seoul, and that heavy investments, heavy government policy needs to be pushed towards investing in making economic centers, zones where people want to be, in cities outside of Seoul. Now, let me be clear. Everyone knows that. This is not me discovering something new. Everyone knows that. The problem is that's incredibly hard to do. It takes a lot of state planning. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of investment. And it takes buy-in from the public to make all of this come together and all of this happen. And that is something that is incredibly difficult. Let's take a look here. Let me show you this article. More than half of South Korea's total population was found to reside in the capital city of Seoul and surrounding metropolitan cities, according to official data released by the government on Wednesday. As of December 2023, the registered population in Seoul, Incheon, Gyeonggi, recorded up to 26.1 million residents, which made up 50.7% of the country's total population. Out of the 26.1 million, 9.39 million were registered in Seoul, 3 were registered in Incheon, and 13.6 were registered in Gyeonggi. That is insane. That is an insane amount of people to be in one metropolitan area, right? 26 million people. New York has a population of like 8.5 million. Like, that is an insane amount of people, all in one corner of the country. So that, what does that do to brain drain down in Busan and Daegu? What does that do to the infrastructure? The economy exists in such a way that if you have all the young talent moving out of the city, well, then you're left with the older people who are retiring, older people who are, getting out of the workforce. What does that do to your economy? This is a major structural problem that needs to be addressed. And what's interesting to me is that while the E administration is aware of this, this is not something, and I'll prove that they're aware of this. They know this is a problem. They know that balanced regional growth has to happen. And I know they know about it because E made a promise about it. Lee Jae-myung made a promise during the presidential campaign to move the presidential offices to Sejong, a city made specifically with the purpose of moving government employees out of Seoul and into a capital city, or an administrative city that was made from scratch. I believe back in 2010. You guys can correct me on that. But this city was made with the thought of, okay, there are too many people in Seoul. There are too many people that are living here and working here. So if we move at least the government complexes out of Seoul, we move the government employees, the aides, all the superfluous government out of Seoul and into Sejong. That will help take off some of the burden of people trying to move to Seoul. Because if you want to get into government, you want to work in government, well, where is the government? If it's moved to Sejong, that takes off some of the strain that the city has. That brings down some of the housing prices, because then people aren't incentivized to move to Seoul. Okay. So how do I know he is aware of this? This is an article from the Chosun Daily. President Lee vows to build Sejong presidential office and the National Assembly. This is a quote from Lee Jae-myung. We should quickly build the second presidential office and moved to Sejong, adding, "It's very spacious and pleasant," he noted. Seeing Sejong's progress, believe decentralization and balanced development have made some headway, and emphasize the most pressing task for South Koreans today is achieving sustained growth, and foundation for growth lies in balanced development. Balanced development. I'll say that again. Balanced development. So he's aware of this. He's aware of this. It continues. Completing Sejong as the administrative capital will lay the cornerstone for balanced development, and pledged, "We will proceed without delay with the construction of the presidential office and the National Assembly building in Sejong." I've heard no conversations on this, none whatsoever. And not only that, let's remember the Democratic Party have a near supermajority. Them and their coalition have a near supermajority in Parliament. They could, if they so chose to, get this initiative, at least get the conversation going, getting the public buy-in. Because again, discipline is required when you're doing a project of this size and this complexity. You're going to be spending billions of dollars. You're going to be needing the buy-in from the general public of, hey, this is going to be bringing down home prices. This is going to be moving people out. But I'm not saying this is a layup. There is no real guarantee that Sejong is going to do what they want it to do. Because again, there's no subway in Sejong. It's all buses. The city is not really finished. There's things that are missing. There are complaints from residents that major things are missing. And that is something that the government's going to have to address. But this is why I'm a little frustrated with and his administration, is you've made these promises. You've made big sweeping promises. And I'm aware. In the campaign, you make all the promises in the world, but you managed to do 15% of the promises you've made. But with a supermajority, to have such reservations makes me concerned that he's not going to follow through on these promises. As again, you have the supermajority. The housing prices aren't getting better. And your plan, according to your own words, is we need to address the manipulations that are happening in the market, the abuses that are happening in the market. But your market is overvalued and overcooked because half the country is living in essentially one mega city. This is an issue that is definitely going to persist. And if not addressed, housing prices will continue to go up. Because the jobs, the opportunities, they are here in Seoul. And this is where people want to be. So, even, and I want to talk with, a professor or something, even looking at doing, a major, I don't want to say subsidies, but incentives for corporations moving their headquarters, maybe down to Busan, moving headquarters down to Daegu, maybe making Daegu the tech capital of Korea. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm not the president. But things need to be done differently. And his very, I don't want to use the word passive, but his very safe, that's the word I'm going to use. His very safe approach to talking about the market, the housing market, makes me nervous, because this is something I think everyone can agree with. This is a major problem that needs radical change. You have 52% of your country living in one place, or 51% of the country living in one place. You need radical change, because that is not sustainable in the long term. Look at the Japanese model. It's just not sustainable. I'm going to keep my eye on this. And I actually think this plays into really nicely our next story. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked that video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And if you have a comment, go ahead and leave it down there in the comments. Thank you. See you in the next one.